Even if we were to accept, which I do not, that this is some sort of function of global warming, as you point out, that statistically the trend is the opposite, the solutions offered up by politicians are the same big government overregulation, overtaxation, loss of sovereignty decisions, to bring in a carbon tax, to recommit to some legal bureaucratic UN process, none of which has any effect on nature. But it's just a placebo. Well, you have to give a sacrifice to the weather gods, or at least the high priests who will pray to the weather gods at the United Nations. So I find it really crass, but we saw this when Calgary had floods a few years back, floods that were completely predictable, happened a century ago before, but when they happen to a city that has built up, you know, that's another thing. I mean, 100 years ago, Houston was a tiny town. Now it's a massive city. Same thing with Calgary, Alberta. It was a tiny town 100 years ago. So of course, the same sort of flood that 100 years ago was no big deal. Of course, it's going to be more spectacular with the built-up city, especially with our 24-hour-a-day news coverage. I find it depressing but completely predictable that left-wing activists are looking to wring out human misery. Never let a good crisis go to waste, as Barack Obama's original chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, said. Last word to you, Mark.
You're exactly right, Ezra. This is no different than using a gun tragedy to push for gun control. This is what they do. It's the equivalent of their climate ambulance chasers. They look for anything. And I just want to, it's so important that people understand this. When you hear of, oh, these 1 in 100 year floods are happening everywhere all the time now, not at all. What's happening is every city, if it was happening to the same city every year, that would be remarkable. But the bottom line is they're going to have a record. Every snowflake is unprecedented and unique. Every storm is in its own way unique and unprecedented. So all they do, the climate activists, is they just dissect the storm and try to find anything. And of course, this is record flooding in Houston. From what we can see, there were higher flood levels in Houston, but not higher precipitation levels. But other hurricanes have produced 100 inches of rain back during the 1963 global cooling scare, when the New York Times said there's an agreement among all scientists, a hurricane hit Cuba with 100 inches of rain, which is a function of how slow it moves, not necessarily how much moisture the hurricane is holding.
That's an excerpt from my daily TV show, The Ezra Levant Show. Normally it's behind a paywall, but I thought you'd like this video, so we put it on YouTube. If you want to subscribe to watch the daily show every day, including always 2 interviews a day, and I read my hate mail, just click on this screen and become a premium member.